The pen hovered over the line. The only sound in the $1,000 an hour boardroom was the quiet hum of the air conditioner. She signed the papers quietly, her hand not shaking once. She was now officially divorced, penniless, and cast aside by her powerful husband. He smirked, watching her walk out of the Park Avenue law firm with nothing but her handbag. But he didn't see the black Maybach that slid to the curb seconds later. He didn't see her get in. And he couldn't imagine that just 30 minutes later, she would be sitting beside a secretive billionaire in his private jet, finalizing a plan that would destroy the very empire her ex-husband just fought to keep. The pen was a heavy, obnoxious thing. A solid gold Mont Blanc, the kind her husband Mark would buy in sets of 5 simply because he could. He'd slid it across the vast polished mahogany table with the same dismissive flick of the wrist he used to signal a waiter. "Well, Alice?" Mark said, his voice smooth and dripping with a victor's condescension. "Don't look so glum. You're getting the condo in Miami. You always loved the beach." "Alice Faulkner." "No," she corrected herself. Alice Tierney was her name before this, and it would be her name after. Looked at him. She didn't look at his eyes, which were a cold, satisfied blue. She looked at his tie knot, a perfect tight Windsor chosen to intimidate. Beside him, his lawyer, a shark in a $5,000 Armani suit, shuffled his papers, eager to move on to his next billing hour. Alice's own lawyer, a weary public interest attorney Mark had sneered at, gave her a small, sympathetic nod. The room was the definition of corporate power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, but the glass was so thick it seemed to trap the silence, making it heavy and suffocating. This was Mark's world. A world of glass towers, silent handshakes, and brutal, quiet victories. Today, he believed, was one of those victories. "He's being generous, Alice," Mark's lawyer purred, gesturing to the final page. "Given the circumstances." The circumstances were the fabricated photos of her having lunch with a male friend from college, twisted by Mark's private investigators into an affair. It was a lie, but a lie Mark had wielded with surgical precision to paint her as the unfaithful party, isolating her from their social circle and voiding the prenuptial agreement. Mark got the Hamptons estate. He got the Park Avenue penthouse they were currently in. He got the art collection, the stock portfolio, and Faulkner Holdings, the company he had built. He always said, from the ground up, conveniently forgetting the $10 million seed money from Alice's inheritance. She was left with a condo she never liked and a one-time payout so small it was a public insult. Alice picked up the pen. She looked at the final signature line. Alice Faulkner. She remembered the nights she'd spent tracing the lines of his company's finances, the nights she'd listened to him brag on the phone about his creative accounting and how he was burying a competitor with a new patent. He'd always dismissed her. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it, darling. Just make sure the catering for the gala is perfect." She'd stopped worrying. She'd started listening. She'd started remembering. "Alice, we don't have all day." Mark sighed, checking his Rolex. Alice met his gaze. Her face was perfectly, devastatingly blank. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She didn't beg. That she knew was what disappointed him the most. He wanted tears. He wanted a scene. He wanted to walk out of this room telling his lawyer how hysterical she was. She gave him nothing. She uncapped the pen. The click was loud in the tomb-like room. Her hand was perfectly steady. She signed her name. But she didn't sign Alice Faulkner. With a clear, defiant stroke, she signed Alice Tierney. Mark scoffed. "A little late for that, isn't it?" She capped the pen and placed it precisely in the center of the table. She stood up. Her dress was a simple beige sheath, worth less than the shoes Mark's lawyer was wearing. "Thank you for your time, gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and calm. She turned and walked to the door. "Oh, and Alice," Mark called out, his voice already bored, already moving on. "Don't bother calling my driver. He's busy. I'm sure you can find a cab." Alice paused at the door, her back to him. "I'm sure I will." She walked out of the office through the marble lobby of the skyscraper and past the security guards who already looked through her as if she were a ghost. She stepped out onto the sidewalk of Park Avenue. The October air was sharp and the noise of the city hit her like a physical blow. She was divorced. She was by Mark's standards ruined. She took a deep breath, clutching the thin strap of her handbag. For the first time in 10 years, she was free. She stood at the curb for exactly 30 seconds. Mark's black Bentley, which had been waiting, pulled away from the curb, deliberately accelerating through a puddle of gutter water, splashing the back of her legs. Alice didn't flinch. She simply watched it go. A moment later, a car so black it seemed to absorb the daylight pulled up to the curb, gliding to a silent stop directly in front of her. It wasn't a Bentley. It was a Maybach S680, a car synonymous with old money and absolute understated power. The rear window lowered, revealing nothing but shadow inside. The driver, dressed in a crisp, dark gray uniform, stepped out. He was tall, with a military bearing. He held the door open for her. "Ms. Tierney," he said, his voice polite and firm. "Mr. Knight is expecting you." Alice looked at the man, then at the opulent waiting interior. She didn't know a Mr. Knight, but her old lawyer had told her, "A car will be waiting, trust the driver, trust the name." She got in. The door closed with a muted vault-like thud, sealing out the entire world. The interior of the Maybach was less like a car and more like a private lounge. The leather was the color of rich cream, and the ambient lighting was a soft, calming amber. There was no sound from the New York traffic outside. It was as if she had entered a different dimension. "Where are we going?" Alice asked, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Teterboro Airport, Ms. Tierney." The driver, whose nameplate identified him as Thomas, replied. He navigated the car through midtown traffic with an effortless, fluid grace, as if the other cars were simply parting for him. Teterboro, the exclusive airport for private jets. Alice's mind raced. Her settlement check, the generous one-time payout, wouldn't even cover the fuel for a trip on a private jet. Mark was the one with the jet, a Bombardier Global 6000 he was keeping. This was something else. This was someone else. "Mr. Knight," she said, testing the name. "I'm afraid I don't know a Mr. Knight." "He knows you, ma'am," Thomas said, his eyes on the road. "He was an old friend. He said to tell you he's cashing in a rain check from a debate tournament, 2009. Alice's breath hitched. 2009. The National Collegiate Debate Championship. Her partner. The brilliant, intense, and absurdly driven scholarship kid who had argued with her, challenged her, and celebrated with her. The one who had disappeared from her life after she'd met Mark. "Damien," she whispered. Thomas glanced at her in the rear-view mirror, a small, respectful smile touching his lips. "Mr. Damien Knight, yes." It seemed impossible. The last she'd heard, Damien had gone to Silicon Valley to work on some startup. Mark had always sneered at the memory of him. "That glorified tech nerd, he'll be burned out and broke by 30. The Maybach soon left the city behind, pulling through a discreet, unmarked security gate at the Teterboro airfield. It didn't stop at a terminal. It drove directly onto the tarmac, pulling up alongside a machine that defied belief. It was a Gulfstream G700, sleek and predatory, painted a matte pearl gray. It was larger than Mark's jet. It was newer. It was, Alice knew from the magazines she used to order for Mark, astronomically more expensive. Thomas opened her door. The jet's engines were already humming a low, powerful thrum she could feel in her chest. A flight attendant in a sharp-tailored suit stood at the base of the stairs. "Welcome, Miss Tierney. We've been holding for you," the attendant said, taking Alice's simple handbag. Alice walked up the stairs, each step feeling unreal. The air was cold, smelling of jet fuel and ozone. She was leaving her old life on the tarmac below. She stepped into the cabin. The scent of new leather and roasted coffee filled the air. The interior was a masterpiece of custom design. Dark woods, brushed platinum fixtures, and plush, swiveling armchairs. And sitting in one of those chairs reading a physical Bloomberg newspaper, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, was a man she hadn't seen in 12 years. He looked up. His eyes, a startling intelligent green, were the same. But everything else was different. The worn-out college sweatshirts were gone, replaced by a dark, bespoke Tom Ford suit. The restless energy was still there, but it was coiled, controlled, and radiating an aura of quiet, unshakable confidence. He folded the newspaper and set it aside. A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine smile she'd seen directed at her in a decade. "Alice Tierney," said Damien Knight. "You are exactly 34 minutes late. I thought you'd be out of there faster." "You," Alice stammered, gripping the back of a chair. "Damien, what is this? How did I know?" He stood up. He was taller than she remembered. "I've been following Faulkner Holdings for 18 months. When I saw the divorce filing, I knew he'd try to bury you. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner, but I had to wait until you were legally clear." Legally clear of him. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please sit. We're on a tight schedule. Wheels up in 5. Alice sank into the cream-colored leather. It was softer than a cloud. "Where are we going?" The engines outside began to build in a crescendo. Damien fastened his seatbelt, his movements economical and precise. "Paris," he said as casually as if he were suggesting coffee. "But first, we have some business to discuss." "What business, Damien? I just signed everything away. I have nothing. Mark, he won." The jet accelerated, pressing Alice back into her seat. The G-force was exhilarating, a sudden powerful push into a new reality. They lifted off the runway, climbing steeply into the sky. Damien watched the New York skyline shrink until it was just a smudge. "That's the thing, Alice," he said, turning to her. "He thinks he won. But Mark Faulkner has been so busy watching his front door he never thought to check his back." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Damien said, taking a slim tablet from the table between them, "that your ex-husband has been trying to get a meeting with the head of Apex Digital Ventures for 6 months, desperate for a new round of financing." He tapped the screen and a company logo appeared. "He's been pitching his stolen patent to them, offering a controlling stake in his new green energy division in exchange for a $500 million buy-in." I know about the patent," Alice said. "I found the original research. He stole it from an inventor in Austin." Damien's smile widened. It was a cold, sharp smile. "I know you did. And I know the inventor. He's my partner." He leaned forward, his green eyes locked on hers. "Alice, I am Apex Digital Ventures. Mark has been pitching his entire future to me." The revelation hung in the air, heavier than the silence in the lawyer's office. Alice stared at him, her mind struggling to connect the scholarship student who lived on ramen noodles with the man who commanded this flying fortress. "You're Apex," she finally managed. "But Forbes lists the CEO as a—" "Robert Harrison," Damien finished. "A very good, very well-paid actor who enjoys being the public face of the company. I, on the other hand, prefer to remain private." The flight attendant appeared, offering champagne. Alice noticed the bottle Dom Perignon marks Celebration Champagne. The sight of it made her stomach clench. "None for me, thank you," she said. "Just water." Damien nodded. "The same for me, Lydia. And the secure comms, please. We have a call in 20. Lydia nodded and disappeared. "You hate that champagne," Damien stated. It wasn't a question. "How do you know that?" "I've been keeping tabs, Alice. Not just on Mark. On you. I saw the pictures from the galas. You always had a glass of water." He leaned back, his expression softening. "I'm sorry. I know this is a lot. 12 years is a long time." "It is," she said, the shock finally ebbing, replaced by a wave of cold, sharp curiosity. "So you've been letting him pitch to you? You've been leading him on?" "Leading him on is an understatement," Damien said. "I've been draining his resources. I've had him commission 3 different multi-million-dollar feasibility studies, all for territories I have no intention of entering. I've had him fly his legal team to Zurich twice for meetings I unavoidably had to cancel at the last minute. Mark is bleeding cash trying to land this one whale that will save his company. Save his company? Alice asked. I thought Faulkner Holdings was solid. He just won everything. Damien shook his head, pulling up a series of charts on his tablet. He won a penthouse and a painting collection. He didn't win the company. The company is a house of cards. He's over-leveraged, exposed in the commercial real estate market, and the only thing he has of any real value is that stolen patent. He needs my money to bring it to market before the real inventor, my partner, files his. Alice's mind was flying faster than the jet. So you're going to pull the funding? I'm not going to pull the funding, Alice, Damien said, his voice dropping. I'm going to pull the rug out from under his entire world. But I was missing one piece, the piece that connects him directly to the theft. My partner can prove he invented it, but we couldn't prove Mark knew it was stolen. It would be a long, messy civil suit. But I can, Alice whispered. But you can, Damien confirmed. You were there. You heard him. You as his wife were a privileged party, but as his ex-wife, you're just a witness. A slow, cold smile, one that mirrored Damien's, touched Alice's lips. He thought he was just getting rid of a wife. He had no idea he was creating his worst enemy. That's why we had to wait, Damien said, until that pen touched the paper, until the decree was final. As of... He checked his watch, a complex, understated Patek Philippe. 58 minutes ago, you are no longer Alice Faulkner. You are Alice Tierney, and you have no marital privilege to protect him. Alice felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just freedom. It was power. So what's in Paris? Paris, Damien said, is where my legal team is waiting, and where Dr. Eris, the man you're about to make very wealthy, is waiting. We have a press conference scheduled for 9:00 a.m. tomorrow Paris time. We are going to announce the launch of his patent backed by Apex. And at the same time, we are filing a $500 million lawsuit against Mark Faulkner for industrial espionage and intellectual property theft. He'll fight it, Alice said. He'll bury you in paperwork. He would, Damien agreed, if he had any money left to pay his lawyers. Alice looked at him confused. What do you mean? Damien's smile faded, replaced by an intensity that was almost frightening. Mark thinks I'm his only problem. He's wrong. He turned the tablet to face her. He thinks he's just in a mild liquidity crunch. He doesn't know why. He thinks it's the market. He pulled up another file. It was a list of Shell Corporation's bond holdings and outstanding debts. Alice, Mark hasn't just been pitching to me. He's been borrowing from me. You've been lending him money? No, Damien said. I've been buying his debt. Every time he needed to float a bond, every time he needed a short-term loan to cover payroll, because he'd overspent on his jet, my Shell Corps bought that debt. He has no idea. He thinks his debt is held by a dozen different impersonal hedge funds. He zoomed in on one line item. As of this morning, I own 70% of Faulkner Holdings' unsecured debt. The moment we land, my team in Zurich has instructions to call in that debt. All of it. At once. Alice finally understood. He won't be able to pay. He won't even be able to make the interest payment, Damien said coldly. He's been using his liquid cash to pay for his sharks. He gestured, indicating the divorce lawyers. He's been trying to hide his assets from you, so he liquefied them, and in doing so, he made himself vulnerable. Alice looked out the window at the endless deep blue of the stratosphere. Mark thought he'd cast her out. He thought he'd won. But he'd only managed to trap himself. But, Damien. Why? Alice asked, her voice quiet. This is a spectacular biblical level of revenge. Why go to all this trouble for me? Damien was quiet for a long moment, watching the clouds far below. Because Alice, in college, you were the only person who ever believed in me. You co-signed the loan for my first server. You told me I wasn't crazy for thinking I could build what I built. He met her gaze. And because I've spent the last 12 years watching that parasite dim your light. Mark Faulkner didn't just steal a patent. He stole you. I'm just here to help you take yourself back. With interest. The secure phone on the table buzzed. Damien picked it up. It's time, he said to Alice. Are you ready to make a statement? Alice took a breath. She thought of the cold office, the gold pen, the splash of gutter water. Yes, she said. Put them on. While Alice and Damien were crossing the Atlantic, Mark Faulkner was celebrating. He was back in his penthouse, the one he had protected from Alice. He'd changed into a casual cashmere sweater and was pouring himself a glass of Macallan 25. His COO, a man named Robert, was sitting on the $100,000 sofa grinning. I have to hand it to you, Mark, Robert said, accepting his own glass. Clean. Fast. She didn't even put up a fight. That new lawyer of yours is a butcher. You get what you pay for, Mark said, smirking. He swirled the amber liquid, admiring the view. She was a liability. All she did was spend money and ask stupid questions. Now we're lean. We're focused. As soon as this Apex deal closes, we'll be untouchable. Any word from Harrison? Robert asked. I got a text from his assistant while I was in the meeting. Mark said, pulling out his phone. He's deeply impressed with the final numbers. He's forwarding them to his board. He's just a puppet, but he's a useful one. The real money man behind Apex, whoever he is smart. He knows a winner. Mark raised his glass. To winning! To winning! Robert echoed. Mark's personal cell phone rang, the one he used for his brokers. He answered it, still smiling. David, tell me good news. The smile vanished. What do you mean, frozen? Mark demanded, his voice dropping an octave. What margin call? On what? Robert sat up, his drink forgotten. That's impossible, Mark snarled. That debt isn't due. Which creditor? Zurich Financial. I don't have anything with them. A consortium. What damn consortium? Put it on the screen, now. Mark stalked over to his home office setup, hitting a button. A large screen descended from the ceiling, lighting up with his portfolio. It was a sea of red. My God, Robert whispered, standing beside him. It's a coordinated call, Mark stammered, watching his liquidity evaporate in real time. They're all calling in the notes, all at once. This isn't a market fluctuation. This is an attack. His other line rang. It was his CFO. Don't tell me, Mark barked into the phone. Mark, we're finished. The CFO's voice was panicked. A creditor. AF Investments. Just called in the $500 million bridge loan. We have 24 hours to pay, or they take the collateral. The collateral, Mark said, his blood turning to ice. The company, Mark. The collateral is all of Faulkner Holdings. Mark's mind raced. AF Investments. I've never heard of them. Who are they? Find them. I'm trying. They're a ghost. A shell corp out of Delaware. Oh wait. Mark. The registration? The primary signatory? Oh no. Who is it, damn it? It's Tierney. The signatory is Alice Tierney. Mark dropped the phone. He stared at the screen, at the name he had just moments ago dismissed. Alice. His stupid, pretty liability of a wife. He thought back. The inheritance he thought was just cash. The shopping trips she took. The nights she was at the museum for board meetings. It wasn't a setup. It was an ambush. She had been buying his debt. Before he could even process the betrayal, an alert flashed on the screen. A Bloomberg news flash. Breaking Apex Digital Ventures announces $1 billion partnership with Dr. Eris Thorne for new Helios clean energy patent. Lawsuit filed against Faulkner Holdings for brazen intellectual property theft. The article featured a photo. A smiling Dr. Aris, and beside him walking into a press conference in Paris was Damien Knight, the burned-out tech nerd. And holding Damien's arm looking composed and powerful was Alice. Mark made a sound that was half choke, half scream. He was ruined. She hadn't just divorced him, she had liquidated him. The morning light in Paris was soft and golden, a stark contrast to the harsh, sterile world of Mark's boardroom. Alice stood on the balcony of her suite at the Hôtel de Crillon, a coffee in her hand. The Place de la Concorde spread out before her a vista of impossible beauty. She had spent the previous evening with Damien's legal team going over her notes, her timelines, and the damning voice memos she'd secretly recorded of Mark bragging about his theft. The lawyers had looked at her with a new profound respect. Damien had given her this suite, the sweet Marie Antoinette, and told her to order anything she wanted. She'd slept for 9 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep she hadn't known in a decade. There was a soft knock. "Come in," she called. Damien entered holding a tablet. He was wearing a casual linen shirt, looking more like the college student she remembered. "Good morning," he said, his smile genuine. "Sleep well." "Like the dead," Alice replied, turning back to the view. Is it done?" "Faulkner Holdings is in receivership as of an hour ago," Damien said, joining her at the balcony. "The board has fired Mark. Your AF Investments, which by the way was brilliant, is now the primary creditor. You essentially own him, or what's left of him." "What is left of him?" "A penthouse in foreclosure, a jet that's about to be seized by my bank, and a reputation that is currently being dissected by every major news outlet on the planet." "Oh," he added, "and a preliminary injunction freezing all his personal assets. He can't even pay his lawyers to fight us." Alice closed her eyes, letting the full weight of her victory settle over her. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like justice. It felt like balance. "And Dr. Aris?" she asked. "He's a very happy man. We're having dinner tonight to celebrate. He wants to thank you personally. You didn't just give him his patent back. You gave him the justice he'd stopped believing in." Alice finally turned to Damien. "And what about you? You spent a fortune on this. You spent 18 months of your life on this." "I did," he said simply. "Why?" she asked again. "It wasn't just for me. It wasn't just for Dr. Aries. What did you get out of this, Damien?" Damien looked out at the city. "When I was building my company, I had a partner, my best friend. We were just like Mark and Dr. Aris. I was the ideas guy. He was the business guy. When we got our first big offer, he took it. He engineered a buyout that locked me out of my own company with my own code. He stole it all. I was left with nothing. It took me 3 years to start again to build Apex from scratch." He looked at her. "I hate thieves, Alice. I hate men who use power to crush people who trust them. Mark Faulkner, he was a personality type I understood very well. Taking him down wasn't just revenge for you. It was housekeeping." He offered her the tablet. "This is yours." She looked at the screen. It was a bank transfer notification. "What is this?" "It's $50 million. "That's your fee," Damien said. "As the primary partner in the recovery of the patent, that's your percentage. It's just the start. AF Investments is now a very real, very powerful holding company. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" Alice stared at the number. It was more than Mark had ever trusted her with. It was more than her original inheritance. It was hers. Earned. She looked at Damien, a spark in her eye he hadn't seen since they were 20. "I want to learn how to do what you do. I want to build things. And I want to find other people like Dr. Aris. I want to fund the people Mark Faulkners of the world overlook." Damien Knight grinned a full, bright, unguarded grin. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. "I'm starting a new division at Apex. A venture capital fund focused on ethical tech and emerging markets. I need someone to run it. Someone with a mind for numbers, an eye for detail, and a spine of absolute steel." "You think I'm that person?" Alice asked. "I know you are," he replied. "You're the woman who just took down a New York tycoon with nothing but his own ego and a few secret notes. The job is yours if you want it. We can run it from here, or London, or New York, wherever you want." Alice looked back at the city. She was no longer an ex-wife. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't even just Alice Tierney. She was a queen, and this was her castle. "I'll take the job," she said, "on one condition. Anything. You stop calling me Ms. Tierney. It's Alice. And second, you have to take me to dinner. Somewhere he could never get a reservation." 6 months passed. The name Mark Faulkner became a cautionary tale whispered in the exclusive clubs and boardrooms of New York. He was a ghost. The SEC, spurred on by the evidence from the lawsuit, had launched its own investigation. Mark was facing criminal charges. He had, as Damien predicted, lost everything. The penthouse, the jet, the art. He was last seen living in a rented flat in New Jersey, his name a permanent stain. Alice, however, was a rising star. She had taken to her new role with the same silent, methodical intensity she had used to dismantle her husband's life. She didn't just run the ethical fund. She became its driving force. She had a talent for seeing the person behind the pitch, for spotting the brilliance that arrogance and bluster often missed. AF Knight Capital, as the press dubbed it, became one of the most successful new VCs in the world. Alice, with her quiet intelligence and a backstory the media couldn't get enough of, was its public face. She had traded her beige sheath dress for the sharp, elegant lines of Chanel and Acris. She commanded boardrooms not with a loud voice but with unassailable facts. She and Damien had become a formidable team. Their partnership was at first strictly professional. They traveled the world from Singapore to Berlin, vetting deals, building new companies. They worked late nights fueled by coffee and a shared driving passion. The romance, when it finally happened, was as quiet and inevitable as their ascent. It wasn't the fiery, possessive passion Mark had demanded. It was a slow burn built on mutual respect. It happened one night in a hotel bar in Tokyo, after they'd closed a deal that would revolutionize sustainable energy in Asia. They were talking about their college days, laughing. "You know," Damien said, looking at her over his glass, "I was terrified of you back then. You were the only one who could ever beat me in a head-to-head argument." "You weren't so bad yourself," Alice smiled. "You were just relentless." "I was," he agreed. He reached across the table, his fingers lightly touching her hand. "I still am." Their eyes met, and the 12 years of lost time, of pain and betrayal, simply dissolved. It wasn't a rescue, it was a reunion. They were on the G700 again, flying back to New York. Alice was reading a proposal, making notes in the margin. Damien was watching her, a look of profound admiration on his face. "What is it?" she asked, not looking up. "I was just thinking," he said. "Do you ever miss it? Any of it?" Alice put the proposal down. She thought of the cold penthouse, the patronizing dismissal, the suffocating weight of being Mrs. Faulkner. "I miss nothing," she said. "I'm not the person who lived that life anymore." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm asking." He opened a small platinum-lined drawer by his seat. He took out a small velvet box. It was not a large, gaudy ring. It was a simple, elegant band with a single, perfect, ethically sourced diamond. "Alice Tierney," he said, his voice completely serious. "You are the most brilliant, resilient, and fascinating person I have ever known. I am not asking you to be my wife. I am asking you to be my partner. In everything. For good." Alice looked at the ring, then at his face. This wasn't a man trying to own her. This was a man asking to stand beside her. She smiled. "Damien Knight. I thought you'd never ask." The air in Davos was thin and sharp-tasting of snow and old money. A year to the day after she had walked out of Mark's life, Alice Tierney stood backstage not in a beige sheath dress, but in a tailored Armani suit, the color of a winter sky. The fabric was a quiet armor, a physical representation of the woman she had become. She was no longer a ghost in someone else's life. She was the most anticipated keynote speaker of the World Economic Forum. She rolled her wrist, feeling the comforting solid weight of the Patek Philippe Damien had given her. It wasn't a gift of possession. It was a mark of partnership. "A watch for the woman who has taken back her time," he'd said. "You're nervous," a quiet voice said beside her. Damien Knight, looking infuriatingly relaxed in a dark turtleneck and blazer, handed her a bottle of water. He was, as far as the world was concerned, the reclusive titan behind Apex. But here in this small shadowed space, he was just her partner. "I'm not nervous," Alice replied, taking a small sip. "I'm cataloging. There are 3 bankers from Credit Suisse in the front row who turned me down for a personal line of credit 2 years ago. The Minister of Finance for Germany is in seat 4B. He needs our green tech fund. And..." She smiled faintly. "Robert, my ex-husband's former COO, is in the 10th row. He's working for Bain Capital now. He looks like he hasn't slept in a week." Damien chuckled, a low, warm sound. "So not nervous, just preparing your lines of fire. That's my girl." He touched her elbow. "They're waiting for you, Alice. Go show them what an empire really looks like." A coordinator with a headset spoke her name. "Ms. Tierney in 5. Alice nodded. She looked at Damien. The love she felt for him was a different creature from the suffocating, desperate affection she'd had for Mark. This was a clean, bright, powerful thing forged in respect. "See you on the other side," she said. "I'll be the one clapping the loudest," he promised. She stepped from the darkness into a blinding wall of light. The auditorium was vast, a sea of the world's most powerful and influential people. A year ago, these faces would have looked through her at a gala. Today, they were silent, their attention fixed, laser-sharp on her. In the front row, Damien caught her eye and gave a small, encouraging nod. He was flanked by a Japanese tech billionaire and a French prime minister, both of whom he was politely ignoring in favor of watching her. Alice walked to the center of the stage, her heels clicking with a steady, confident rhythm. She stood at the lectern, but didn't grip it. She let her hands rest at her sides. She was not here to plead, to defend, or to prove. She was here to declare. "Good morning," she began. Her voice was clear and resonant, carrying across the silent hall. "My name is Alice Tierney, and I am the co-founder of AF Knight Capital." She paused, letting the name settle. The AF was a private joke, after Faulkner. "For most of my adult life," she continued, "I was taught to believe that power is something you take. That it is a zero-sum game. A victory for one must by necessity be a loss for another. For 10 years I lived in a world defined by that belief. I had a front-row seat to an empire built on that principle. An empire built on what could be taken, what could be stolen, and who could be diminished in the process." In the 10th row, Robert shifted in his seat, his face pale. "I watched a man build a fortress of glass and steel around himself, believing that was strength. I watched him trade in assets in companies and in people, believing that acquisition was success. But a fortress, I learned, is not a symbol of power. It is a symbol of fear. And what you take can just as easily be taken from you." A ripple of understanding, of nervous murmuring, went through the crowd. They all knew her story. The Wall Street Journal had run a 6-page exposé titled, "The Quiet Coup: How Alice Tierney Walked Away with an Empire." That empire, Alice said, her voice dropping, is gone. It collapsed as all houses built on a rotten foundation must. It fell because it was hollow. It was built by a man so terrified of losing what he had, he never stopped to build anything of value. She moved from behind the lectern, walking closer to the edge of the stage, her presence holding every person captive. "True power," she declared, "is not something you take. It is something you build. It is not a fortress to protect yourself. It is a bridge to connect with others. When we founded AF Knight Capital, we did so on one simple guiding principle. We do not invest in killer apps. We invest in builders. We do not look for disruptors who wish to tear down. We find the creators, the visionaries, the quiet geniuses who want to add to the world, not just acquire pieces of it. She looked directly at the Credit Suisse bankers. We fund the people you overlook, the ones who don't have the right last name, the right connections, or the right aggressive bluster. We fund the Dr. Eris Thorns of the world, the brilliant minds betrayed by bullies left with nothing but their own genius. Our Helios Energy project, built from his stolen patent, is now on track to power 2 million homes by next year. That, gentlemen, that is power. That is an empire. My former life, she concluded, her voice softening but losing none of its steel, ended in a sterile boardroom on Park Avenue. It ended with a gold pen and a patronizing smile. I walked out of that room with nothing but my name. But it turned out, she smiled a true brilliant smile that lit up the stage, that was the only thing I ever needed. For a full 5 seconds there was absolute silence. Then the auditorium erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous standing ovation. A roar of approval. Damien was on his feet, his hands clapping loud and steady, his eyes filled with a pride that was so profound, Alice felt it across the room. The reception afterward was a crush of bodies. Alice was immediately surrounded, a vortex of Chanel suits and military-grade handshakes. Ms. Tierney, a marvelous speech, truly. The German finance minister kissed her hand. We must discuss your fund's investment in our Berlin solar grid. Robert, how unexpected. Alice turned. It was Robert Marks, old COO, his face a mask of nervous sweat. He was holding 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to her. Alice, he said, his voice overly familiar. Incredible. Just incredible. I always knew you had it in you. Alice looked at the offered glass, then at his face. This was the man who had sat on her sofa celebrating with Mark, calling her a liability. Did you? She asked, her voice quiet and cool. I don't recall that. Ah, well, you know how things were. He stammered, his bravado fading. Mark, he was a difficult man to work for. You know that better than anyone. Listen, I'm at Bain now. We're looking for new partners, and what you're doing with AFK, it's the future. I'd love to, you know, build a bridge, as you said. He was quoting her speech. The audacity of it was almost impressive. Alice didn't take the glass. Robert, she said, her voice so soft he had to lean in. The last time I saw you, you were toasting my financial ruin. You were an accessory to a man who tried to destroy me. The bridge you want to build is, I suspect, just a lifeline for your own career. My answer is no, and if you ever quote me to my face again, you'll find my legal team is just as talented as my investment team. Robert's face went from pale to ashen. He set the champagne glass down on a passing tray, his hand shaking. I see. Excuse me. He all but ran, disappearing into the crowd. A moment later, a new voice cut through. Alice Faulkner. My God, is that you? Alice turned her composure flawless. It was a woman named Genevieve, the wife of one of Mark's former board members. Genevieve had been the queen bee of their old social circle, the one who had personally led the campaign to shun Alice, the one who had accidentally uninvited her from the charity board. She was dressed in a gaudy sequined gown that looked desperate in the bright afternoon light. She rushed forward, grabbing Alice's hands. Darling, I just heard your speech. Chills. We've all been reading about you. It's just... wow. You look like a different person. I'm a different person, Genevieve, Alice said, gently retrieving her hands. Oh, of course you must be. Listen, darling, it was just awful what Mark did. Truly awful. We all said so. We had no idea. You had no idea? Alice asked, her voice neutral. None. We were just, well, you know, Mark had everyone fooled. But you landed on your feet, didn't you? right on top of the world. Genevieve leaned in, her smile becoming conspiratorial. Listen, my nephew has this tiny little startup, a new app for rating dog walkers. It's very clever, and I thought, who better than Alice? Maybe you and Mr. Knight could just hear his pitch. For old time's sake. For old time's sake, Alice repeated. She looked at this woman, at the desperate, sycophantic smile, and felt nothing. No anger, no bitterness, just distance. It was like looking at a creature in a zoo. Genevieve, Alice said, the last time we spoke you told me I was no longer a fit for the Children's Literacy Fund. You were right, I wasn't, and your nephew is not a fit for mine. I have to go. She turned, leaving Genevieve with her mouth open, and walked straight to Damien, who was waiting by the door. He held out his arm. Had enough of your adoring public. And my former fan club, Alice said, taking his arm. Let's go home. Home was a sprawling glass and timber chalet perched on the side of a mountain with a view that looked like it had been stolen from a postcard. The G700, their original chariot, had brought them, and it waited at the private airfield below. They were in the chalet's main room, a fire roaring in a massive stone hearth. The snow was falling heavily now, cocooning them in a world of white and silence. Alice had changed into a soft cashmere sweater, and she was curled on the sofa, her head in Damien's lap. He was running his fingers through her hair, and they were both silent for a long, peaceful time, simply decompressing. They were terrified of you, Damien said finally. They weren't terrified of me, Alice murmured. They were terrified of my power. There's a difference. Is there? He asked. You wield it well. I learned from the best. She smiled, looking up at him. Both the worst and the best. Damien's secure phone buzzed on the table. He rarely looked at it after 8 p.m., but he'd been waiting for this. He picked it up, his expression hardening as he read. It's from our legal team in New York, he said. Alice sat up, instantly alert. What is it? It's about Mark. Alice felt a familiar cold clench in her stomach, but it was distant now. Is he appealing the SEC ruling? No, he can't. He's penniless. Damien said, a note of finality in his voice. He was released from the minimum security facility in Otisville 2 days ago. Good behavior. He's been busy. Busy how? Damien handed her the phone. It was a forwarded email chain. The original email was from Mark. It wasn't sent to Dr. Eris or to Alice or to anyone in power. It was sent to a general careers Helios.com inbox. It was a job application. Alice read it, her eyes scanning the pathetic, rambling text. Mark was applying for a mid-level analyst position in strategy. He'd attached his old pre-scandal resume. He'd written a full groveling cover letter praising the visionary work of Helios Energy. He wrote about his long-standing passion for the green energy sector and his unique insights into the market. He was in effect applying to work for the company built on the patent he'd stolen from the man he'd tried to ruin. My God, Alice whispered. The desperation. He actually thinks he can get back in. He thinks he can just start over inside our world. It's the only world he knows, Damien said grimly. He's a parasite. He's looking for a new host. The email chain continued. The low-level HR manager had correctly flagged the name and sent it to security. Security had sent it to legal. Legal had sent it to Dr. Eris. And Dr. Eris had replied. Alice scrolled down to the final message. It was a formal, curt response from Dr. Eris's personal email, but it was CC'd to the entire legal department of AF Knight Capital. Subject RE application, strategic analyst, Mark Faulkner. Mr. Faulkner. Your application is rejected. Furthermore, this email serves as a formal notice to cease and desist any and all contact with Helios Energy, its subsidiaries, its executives, and any company affiliated with AF Knight Capital in perpetuity. A violation of this request will be met with immediate legal action for harassment. No further correspondence will be acknowledged. Dr. Eris Thorne. It wasn't just a no. It was a legal execution. It was the final door in the world being slammed, bolted, and barricaded in his face. He was not just an outcast. He was a liability. A name on a legal document to be actively avoided. Alice handed the phone back to Damien. She stood up and walked to the massive window looking out at the falling snow. She thought of Mark standing in the boardroom, his victor's smirk. She thought of him in a rented flat or a halfway house reading that email. She felt nothing. No pity, no triumph, no anger. The space he had occupied in her head, the vast, dark territory of her anger and her plots for revenge, was just empty. And in its place, the quiet, warm hum of her own life. "It's over," she said, her voice quiet. "It's really finally over." Damien came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Yes," he said, "it is." They stood there for a long time, watching the snow bury the world, making it clean and new. "So, Ms. Tierney," Damien murmured into her ear, "you just conquered Davos. You've officially put your ghost to rest. What do you want to do tomorrow?" Alice leaned back against his chest, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. "I think," she said, "it's time we took a vacation. A real one. No phones, no keynotes." "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. "The G800 is fueled and waiting." "The G800? What happened to the 700? "I upgraded," Damien said. "I also bought a little something." "Damien, what did you buy?" she asked, already half laughing. "A small island, off the coast of New Zealand. It's got a research station. I was thinking, AF Night Capital's next big project could be in sustainable aquaculture, and it has a very nice, very private beach." Alice turned in his arms to face him. She looked at the man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had respected her when she was dismissed, and who had partnered with her to build a new world. "Damien Knight," she said, "that is the best idea you've ever had." "I have my moments," he smiled. "Just one thing," Alice said, tracing the line of his jaw. "On this vacation, I get the window seat." He laughed, a full, genuine sound that filled the warm room. "Anything you want, Alice. Anything in the world." He kissed her, not with the fire of a new romance, but with the deep, abiding certainty of a forever partnership. Outside the snow fell, and inside the new empire built, not on theft, but on brilliance, was quiet and safe, and just beginning. The journey from a silent signature to a seat of power shows that the end of one chapter is often the explosive beginning of another. Alice's story is one of quiet strength, hidden intelligence, and the powerful justice that comes when you're underestimated. What was your favorite twist? Did you suspect Alice's secret plan? Or were you as shocked as Mark when the tables turned? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one, and your ideas often inspire our next story. If you love this story of revenge and rebirth, please hit that like button, as it truly helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell. We have so many more stories of drama, romance, and incredible twists coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thank you for your support. We'll see you in the next story.